I've been showing off horror comics all month, and every Sunday I've shown off a different Swamp Thing Absolute Edition. So it's only natural that today we talk about Absolute Swamp Thing Volume 3. Does Alan Moore stick the landing? And where do you go from here with reading Swamp Thing? Stay tuned and watch this video until the end. And we're back. My name is Taylor of Taylor Talks Comics. I have been doing horror comics all month. 31 days of October, you're getting a new horror comic video on my channel every day. I have a handy dandy playlist that's called Halloween Horrors 2024 if you want to check that out to catch up on any videos that you might have missed. And please subscribe so you don't miss any future content. But today we're talking Absolute Swamp Thing Volume 3 by Alan Moore with artwork by Rick Veitch, John Totleben, Alfredo Alcala, and Stephen Bissette. So, like I said, this month so far, every Sunday I've shown off a different Absolute edition. Last week was Volume 2. The week before that we did Volume 1. And then the week before that we did what started it all off with the Len Wein Bernie Wrightson Absolute edition. So real quickly I want to show you how great these look on the shelf together, because these were really well designed books. So if you have these on your shelf, they're going to look something like this. And you can see the Alan Moore Swamp Things do have a connecting design on the background back there. And then the Swamp Thing Bernie Wrightson, the design doesn't match, but all the font and lettering does. So it look really good on the shelf. So let's set these aside now and talk about Volume 3. So this is the concluding volume of the Alan Moore run of Swamp Thing. Here's the outer front cover of the slipcase. I already showed you the spine. Here's the back cover. This loving image by John Totleben. Top is just black. Bottom is just got the barcode. Does say DC Black label on it. Then when you take the slipcase off, here's what the book looks like underneath. And it still maintains that same beautiful design with a mossy finish on the cover. It's like a felt finish. And gold lettering on the spine there. And the back is just plain green with a little bit of flowers and growth around the DC Black Label logo. We open up to this great end papers and opening papers. There's Absolute Swamp Thing Volume 3 with the credits page. And I'd like to also note, as I did in the first two volumes, that the coloring, this has been recolored. The original series was colored by Tatiana Wood, but these Absolute editions have been recolored by Steve Oliff. There's actually an example in the back talking about his coloring process, which we'll get to in a little bit. Then here's the great table of contents listing off every issue. This collects issues 51 through 64, which is the concluding issue that Alan Moore did. And it also includes the Jungle Line, a story from DC Comics Presents, which was drawn by Rick Veitch with inks by Al Williamson, and the story was written by Alan Moore. So they packed that in here too. It's like the missing Alan Moore Swamp Thing story, I guess. So with all three volumes, you have everything. And that's some really cool back matter, which we'll get to. So as we open up this issue, as we left off in Volume 2, Swamp Thing's, the love of his life, has been imprisoned for having a relationship with him. It's almost considered like bestiality or something within America, I guess, because she's tried, not just in her home area. You do get cool appearances by the Phantom Stranger and Dead Man here. They both kind of pop in here and there throughout the Alan Moore run, as well as the Spectre, who I feel like are kind of like the trifecta of DC horror characters. And here's the court case and the judge talking about how absurd this whole situation is. And then sorry. And then as we get through here, Swamp Thing is obviously super angry with the situation, what's going on. He has this great cover here. I love this cover so much. And then we're going to Arkham Asylum and Gotham City. And that's where the large part of the first part of this absolute takes place, is in Arkham City. Or sorry, Gotham City. And Swamp Thing just goes nuts. He can't stand the way that the love of his life is being treated. So he decides to take it out on Gotham City. And at this point, Swamp Thing has become something of a god, something more beyond just the Swamp Thing himself. This is another great cover where it looks like almost Batman's fighting a kaiju version of Swamp Thing. It's a giant size spectacular. I love like the TV appearances and stuff, how it looks fuzzy. I think is this the John Totleben issue? I think this is all the John Totleben on this issue. What issue is this? 53. Yeah, all the art's by John Totleben in this giant-sized issue. It's like really a masterclass of John Totleben just stretching his muscles and showing what he can do. Because typically he was only on inks for Stephen Bissette before this, but just look at that awesome psychedelic artwork. But he really nails this one. And this is when Swamp Thing attacks Gotham, and all throughout the urban landscapes of Gotham becomes this giant growth where everywhere it looks like almost a giant forest. Swamp Thing just takes over like the whole thing. You see kaiju Swamp Thing here. Reminiscent of like the Jack Kirby monster comics. The Jack Kirby monster comics of like the 50s in Marvel. I love that lettering too. And then you see all this growth in Gotham, just completely taking over the plant life. Because like I said, Swamp Thing's becoming something of a god at this point, where he can, that's all him doing that. Like he controls all plant life. And just totally takes over and demands that they release her from prison so that he can have her back in his life. And everyone, it becomes like this political, social commentary almost of like, is their love life really affecting anything else, and should they just let them be and ignore this whole court case and things. And then Batman gets involved at the end there. And they're just trying to get Swamp Thing. Oh, and then this is when Swamp Thing disappears. I love that too, the image with that panel. So Swamp Thing disappears, and this is when Abby is, she's got her friend Liz, is it? Yeah, Liz. And Liz has, I think Stephen Bissette in the back describes her as like the Gale Weathers type of, this panel is beautiful too, journalist, where she's like Gale Weathers from like the Scream franchise, Courtney Cox's character, where she's just like always trying to get the story and adamant about that. Well, this is Liz beyond, when she goes crazy and she's like living on her own. She's like almost victimized by her romantic interest, and he's trying to control her and enslave her basically in their living place, and he doesn't want her to get out anywhere else. So Abby's trying to protect Liz from that. In the midst of that, Abby's trying to mourn the death of Swamp Thing, which is a spoiler, but we all know that Swamp Thing lives on after this, right? So I don't want to, it's not like I'm speaking out of school here. Like, we all know that he's going to survive. And this is when the seed of an idea of Swamp Thing ends up in space with My Blue Heaven. And then this issue is the My Blue Heaven issue. Again, a great cover by Stephen Bissette. Bissette does provide most of the covers still throughout the end of the series, even though his interior artwork doesn't show up so much in this volume as it did in the previous volumes. And My Blue Heaven is where Swamp Thing is pretty much grown onto a different planet, and he's going through the process of rebuilding himself, literally. And it is kind of reminiscent of like the Watchmen issue of where Dr. Manhattan is on, Mars, and is speaking about humanity and speaking about how unfair humans are and how stupid they are, kind of, and what they're worried about the wrong things. And this is rebuilding himself. You get a lot of similar vibes throughout the dialogue here of Swamp Thing. And this is where Alan Moore gives a little bit more sci-fi stuff, and Rick Veitch surmised that this was because that's what Rick Veitch liked to draw, and Alan Moore does a great job of writing stories for his artists and what their interests are in drawing. So this is Mysteries in Space. This is the next issue, where he encounters Adam Strange right here. And Adam Strange, if you're familiar with his back history, and if you're not, they're going to explain it here, so don't worry about that. But he's trapped between two worlds, Earth and is it Zinlaw? Sorry, I always mix these things up. And Swamp Thing then finds himself onto the planet where Adam Strange goes and meets the love of his life, and it turns out that Hawkman and Hawkgirl are trying to start some sort of political relationship situation with that planet, and Adam Strange doesn't necessarily trust them. And Swamp Thing appears, and Adam Strange thinks that he's a monster, so he's trying to fight him. And then we get this great cover here by Stephen Bissette, which is fun to see him draw Hawkman and Hawkgirl, because that was a series that Joe Kubert drew back in the day, and Joe Kubert is the teacher in the school, the Kubert School, where Stephen Bissette, Rick Veitch, and John Totleben all met. They were in one of the early classes there for Joe Kubert. So it's really cool to see him draw those characters, Rick Veitch draw these characters, and then Stephen Bissette draw them on the covers. And like most superhero crossovers, they fight when they first meet, but then they get together and realize that maybe they shouldn't fight. And then back here we get a little back history of Abby with her dad growing up, and then how she has a fondness for him, like she does with Swamp Thing, and there's kind of a trust there. Look at that great horror artwork by Veitch on that one. And then we're going to get into the real esoteric stuff. So this is an amazing cover by John Totleben. And I think John Totleben is the artist on this, right? Yeah. He's the only artist on this one. He does the inks and pencils. And this is all written in dialogue form. And it's done in these like crazy splash pages, like these really like inventive, different looking splash pages, incredible artwork. I would like to know the process of John Totleben on this, because it looks like there's maybe some mixed media applied here. I know there's some mixed media applied here on some of these pages, because there's process pages in the back. But really psychedelic, and it's just totally Alan Moore getting to his narration of Swamp Thing rebuilding himself and all the issues and torment he's going through in this process. And this is when Alan Moore gets into this stuff throughout this book. It reminds me a lot of like Alejandro Jodorowsky's work with his different European comics. It's definitely going beyond just your average DC comic. Such a great cover with the Green Lantern ring, because the Green Lanterns will be appearing in here. So now we're getting to like the real psychedelia of Swamp Thing as he's again rebuilding himself. Just amazing artwork there. Now we're getting to the Jack Kirby tribute, where we're using all of the Jack Kirby characters that he created in the Fourth World. And again, Rick Veitch is a huge Jack Kirby fan and aficionado. he even named his son Kirby. I love all these panel layouts of looking back in history of the world and things. Great image of Darkseid. Rick Veitch is so awesome. I love his artwork. And that's such a cool image right there too. Now this is Loose Ends Reprise. This is the penultimate issue of Alan Moore's run. And it's called Loose Ends Reprise because Loose Ends was the name of the issue that Alan Moore started off the run with before he got to the anatomy lesson, where he was tying up all the loose ends from the previous runs of Swamp Thing before he started his own. So now he's tying up all the loose ends from all the stories, all the loose threads that he was left open for Swamp Thing in the beginning of his run, or at that state of his run, at that point. Look at that image. So he's tying them all up for the next writer. And now 64 is his concluding issue, where he really does tie up, or where he finishes it all off. Kind of his swan song, his final letter to the Swamp Thing character, and setting him and Abby in a starting path for the next creative team to take over. Look at that amazing page spread. Again, all the inventive layouts they use throughout this entire series, just amazing stuff. And really the birth of Vertigo comics. Now we get this character throughout is kind of narrating it, and he looks very reminiscent of Alan Moore himself. Is that Alan Moore? Who knows? And that's the final issue. And then we do have DC Comics Presents. This comes with a ribbon too, I should have said. DC Comics Presents 85. This is included in like the Alan Moore hardcover of like Alan Moore DC stories or whatever it's called. But this is really a fun issue crossover with Swamp Thing and Superman. And then we get to the back matter. And before we get to the back matter, where do you go from here? Well, DC Comics just released a trade paperback of Rick Veitch, Swamp Thing Book 1, Wild Things. And this includes the first parts of the Rick Veitch run on Swamp Thing. He's who takes over after Alan Moore on writing and artwork, and then Alfredo Alcala does a lot of his inking. And this includes issues 65 through 73. So this absolute edition will finish you off on issue 64. Then you start off issue 65 with this trade paperback. It also includes 2 issues of Hellblazer and a story from Secret Origins 23. So that's just came out, and that's where you want to go after reading this. Now, as far as the back matter goes, we get John Totleben writing about his experience with this part of the run and some of the mixed media that he was using. There's like a whole layout that he used of zippers and clocks and things, rendering this psychedelic alien landscape that Swamp Thing encounters. And here's the script for that issue 60 by Alan Moore. I think it includes the entire script, which I love reading Alan Moore scripts. They're fascinating to see his process, and they act as kind of a letter to his artist as well. And then here's the art of remastering. Oh, there's the original art page of the Darkseid page from Rick Veitch. Art of remastering. So this is Steve Oliff talking about his process of coloring. So that's been a controversy with these absolute editions, is why did they get rid of Tatiana Wood's colorings, and why did Steve Oliff do what he did, kind of thing. I still maintain that the coloring is good. Steve Oliff is a master colorist with comics. It is very different though. Tatiana Wood's coloring with Swamp Thing, there was no issues with it. I loved it. It's my preference is to read it in the original coloring, but Steve Oliff is not bad. I think people kind of spread around that these absolute editions are colored bad. It's very good coloring. It's just different and modernized. But here's some examples. So he shows like the original coloring by Tatiana Wood with his modern coloring side by side. You can see like Tatiana Wood had more flat colors and it's more psychedelic looking. And then Steve Oliff went for more of a natural, modernized coloring process. And sometimes it works. And like this page, like, dare I say, Steve Oliff's coloring looks better on this page than this one. But this one here, like that's like that's the coloring that I want too. So it's kind of a mixture of both. Because like this one is so natural, it takes like some of the elements out of it that makes it a comic book. in my opinion. And then you can see like the difference on the cover there. And then the biographies. That's it. So that is Swamp Thing Absolute Volume 3. That is the last Swamp Thing Absolute that we have to date as of October 2024. Hopefully we get some more Swamp Thing in Absolute Edition in the future. And like I said, you can move on to this volume after this. Thank you guys for watching. Again, please subscribe to my channel. I'm on my road to 3,000 subscribers and I need your help. I'm trying to get there by the end of this year. Share my videos, share my channel around. I'd really appreciate that as well. Give the video a thumbs up and comment down below. Those things will also help the channel grow, as it helps the YouTube algorithm put my videos in my channel in front of people's eyeballs that don't know my channel exists. But thank you guys. Keep talking comics.